I'm Mark Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I have the pleasure of Brian Thomas, the Vice President of MSP and Channel Programs at Malwarebytes. How are we doing, Brian?
Mark, how you doing? It's bright and sunny in Austin, Texas right now. Great to be on the show. Yes.
Yeah, thanks very much for joining us. Now, Brian, I normally look at someone's LinkedIn profile before they come on the show and think, what is the one thing I can tease them about of what their background is and why they've done it? And I looked at your profile and it was quite solid. And I looked right at the bottom and I thought, Brian started or was going to start a career in advertising. You did a degree in it. So tell the listeners, how come you started thinking about doing an advertising degree at university?
All right. So you're going to go way back on me, huh? All right. Nicely played. Nicely played. So yeah, going back to Chicago for DePaul University. Yeah, that's where I finished my undergrad. And have you ever seen the show on HBO, or I believe maybe it's AMC, Mad Men? Have you ever seen Mad Men?
No, I haven't seen it. No.
Oh, okay. Well, those Mad Men was the 1950s folks that were all in advertising in New York. That's what that show is about. And my plan going into college was to work for one of the big time advertising firms. What I wanted to do was something a lot more on the creative side of the house. I wanted to film commercials, and I wanted to move my way up from copywriter all the way up to a creative director eventually and start filming commercials. I had a lot of interest in cinema. I had a lot of interest in international business, and I wanted to move to that point where I was strategizing and storyboarding commercials for Fortune 100 brands. That's how I got my start in college. But obviously, as you can see on the resume, things shifted pretty suddenly when I moved from Chicago to Austin.
And did you go straight into SHI, because they're a big partner in the US, or they're a big partner in the UK actually as well. So was that your first intro into IT sales?
Yeah, actually, it was. Funny enough, well, it's not so funny, I guess, but I was actually kind of a victim of the times. What ended up happening is I actually graduated in that 2008 to 2012 time period. If you remember, that was a massive recession, and it particularly hit the U.S. pretty hard. So I had a lot of friends that were going into finance and business, and I was in the business school, which was tied to advertising. And at the time, I was looking at my prospects, my long-term career prospects in 2012, and you're going, well, geez, I'm going to be making $30K a year for probably 15 years straight before I'm getting promoted, before I'm getting anywhere close to a creative director. So I'm going, you know what? I'm going to get out of the snow. I'm going to get out of this dreary weather. I'm going to head down to Austin, Texas, which was blowing up at the time, right? Still is today. It's still very much a hotbed city. Lots of startups going on here. And you know what? I'm going to make some money. I'm going to get into sales, and I'm going to take some of the things that I've learned on the creative side of the house, right, with my advertising degree, and apply them to technology, because at the time, that was one of the vectors into the market that was doing really well. It was almost recession proof, right? So you saw a lot of people coming out of business schools with finance degrees in particular, and instead of going into the Morgan Stanleys of the world, right, we were going all into tech. So at that time period, that's what I decided to do. I got in my car. I drove all the way down with all my belongings after I got the degree. And I talked to some friends, networked around, finally got an interview at SHI at 22 years old. I started working for, I believe today, it's the second largest DMR or reseller in the US. They're second only to CDW in terms of market cap. And the CEO, if you're familiar with her, Ty Lee, is, I believe, one of the top 10 richest female and female minorities in the world. She's just a couple rings down from Oprah. So it was a really exciting time back then. But that's how I got my start in the market.
And then after 3 years, you moved. Did you move their locations again? Because I saw on your profiles like these ain't gone to San Diego.
Yeah, I mean, at the time I was single. You got to do that. You gotta have some fun, right? You gotta have some fun when you're single. You gotta keep it mobile. But yeah, I started as an account executive. I worked my way up as an account executive, and that's really where I fell in love. I think with technology, channel sales in particular. I worked on the, if you're familiar with Meraki, I was with Meraki pre-acquisition as a business development manager for the SHI account. And that's where I was traveling all over the country, right? So I got to see all of these offices throughout the country, that SHI field representatives from every piece of the SHI business, whether it was enterprise, SLED, SMB, regardless of what market they were touching. I got to see every piece of the country as I was educating them, both pre and post acquisition of the Cisco Meraki solution. And so that time came to an end after Cisco acquired Meraki. And I decided, you know what? I want to go back to a startup. I loved what Meraki was. I loved the DNA of Meraki previous to the Cisco acquisition. I'm going, no, I want to go to a look and feel of something really similar in that sub 100 employee realm, right? A startup. And at the time, that was Mojo Networks, which was based in San Francisco, and they had a very flexible work from home policy, of which I said, where is the most sunshine? Where's the most fun? Especially when you're single, and that would be San Diego.
And so what obviously you moved on from there, and I've obviously noticed you were at WatchGuard and now you're at Malwarebytes, but what drew you to the sort of cybersecurity sector?
Yeah, so that came a bit later, right? So I was in networking, and I was within Wi-Fi, and I was within, obviously network infrastructure previous to that, with a lot of channel sales background. And then that came after Mojo got acquired by Arista. So I have a lot of things where I have pre and post acquisition, as you see a lot in my resume. So I joined the startup, and the startup is so successful it gets acquired, and that's been kind of the story. But the reason, to answer your question, I fell in love with cybersecurity was actually with WatchGuard. So I moved up to Seattle when we had our first kid. I got married, had our first kid, moved up to Seattle. And at that time, there was a great job opportunity for me when I was moving from Arista, right? We had been acquired by Arista. I stayed in for a year after the acquisition. And again, same thing. I wanted to move up into a more startup-y culture. And at the time, that was WatchGuard. So I moved up there, and then I was with WatchGuard for 2.5 years. And I was there both pre and post Panda security acquisition. And while Panda was getting acquired by WatchGuard, that's where I fell in love with endpoint security, which of course led me to eventually Malwarebytes, which was a competitor at the time.